27 years ago, a school bus drove away with Dawn Holloway's 8-year-old son and never came back. Last night, she swiped TikTok and heard him call out the nickname only she used. Now a mother with nothing left to lose is flying to New Orleans to prove the impossible. Before we continue the story, I just want to say thank you for listening. I'm just a small storyteller. And if this touched you, please consider hitting that subscribe button for more quiet, heartwarming stories like this one. Let me know in the comments where and what time you're listening from. I read them all. Now let's hear the story. Marcusville, Alabama, March 12, 1998. Dawn Holloway woke before her alarm, drawn from a shallow dream by the low hum of the refrigerator and the steady cough of the old window unit that kept her mill house cool in early spring. She dressed by the dim light over the stove, careful not to wake her husband, Leon, who had worked the late shift. In the bedroom, her son, Jamal, was already half awake, flipping the pages of a comic book even though he was supposed to be putting on his socks. Dawn crouched beside his bed and tied the laces of his sneakers, reminding him that a field trip permission slip was still crumpled in her purse and she would sign it during her lunch break. Jamal grinned, showing the space where his front tooth had fallen out, and promised to behave. He was 8 years old, bright as noon and curious about everything, especially how a whole school bus could turn corners without tipping over. On the front porch, he shrugged into a jacket 2 sizes too big. The neighbors had passed it down, and raced ahead to place a skateboard on the top step the way he always did, imagining it was a rocket waiting to launch. Dawn kissed the crown of his head, smoothed the collar, and watched as he scrambled down the walk, backpack bouncing like a small parachute. The number 17 bus pulled up in a cloud of gravel dust. Walter Phelps, tall and gaunt in his tan driver's cap, opened the creaking door and tipped his head. Dawn waved, thankful that a familiar man drove the route. Jamal climbed aboard, turned, and flashed the double thumbs-up signal they had invented for good luck. The door folded shut. Dawn listened to the diesel groan as the bus lumbered down Sycamore Lane, tires hissing on damp pavement. Then she locked the screen door, poured coffee into a thermos, and hurried to catch the carpool that took her and 3 other women to Dalton Textiles. At work, the air smelled of cotton lint and machine oil. Dawn's job was monitoring the spindles, fingers flicking threads into place. 36 rows of looms clicked in staggered rhythm. She loved the white noise because it left room inside her mind for thoughts of Jamal, his insistence on learning every constellation, his fear of the deep end of the community pool, the way he sang "Row Your Boat" under his breath when he counted. At 9:30, the loom beside her jammed, and she went to clear it just as the floor manager shouted that she had a phone call. No one called the plant unless something was wrong. The line crackled. Principal Carter sounded shaken. Dawn's son, Carter said, was absent and unaccounted for. Was Jamal sick? Had she kept him home? Dawn's free hand tightened on the phone cord as she stared across the blur of spinning spools. She mumbled that she was on her way and left the factory floor without clocking out. The school's parking lot was already crowded with patrol cars and teachers. Deputy Hammond led her to the office where Walter Phelps sat pale and blinking behind a desk, denim cap twisting in his hands. He insisted he had dropped Jamal at the front gate with the other children. The onboard camera, installed only at the beginning of the month, had mysteriously failed that morning, recording static. Dawn asked whether Jamal might have followed friends into the woods that bordered the playground, but by then several teachers had swept the area. Hammond spoke gently, but Dawn felt the message behind every kindness. They had no idea where a child had gone. The next hours ran together like rain down a window. Dawn marched the deputy along Jamal's possible walking routes, calling his name until her throat burned. By dusk, volunteers canvassed the soybean fields and the creek bed, fanning out with flashlights that painted fleeting circles on the grass. Leon arrived from the mill searching for any order he could impose on chaos. He tore plywood from an old shed after someone suggested Jamal might be hiding inside. Dogs from the county kennel sniffed backpacks and pillowcases. Helicopters arrived at sunrise, thumping across the pale sky while reporters scribbled notes at the roadside command post. Dawn could feel time turning viscous, each second too heavy to measure. The next week brought prayer circles, donated casseroles, and missing child posters Dawn designed on the school library computer. She taped them to every utility pole in 3 counties, each sheet showing Jamal's tooth gap grin, his birthmark like a thumbprint under his left ear, and her home phone number. She refused to change the message tape even after it filled with static from hang-ups and prank calls. At night, she sat on Jamal's bed, inhaling the faint scent of grass and bubblegum that still clung to the pillow. She tried to imagine him warm and safe somewhere and failed, because any place without her did not feel safe. Days became months. The sheriff announced that every credible lead had been exhausted. Volunteers drifted back to ordinary life. Walter Phelps went on unpaid leave, then moved to Mississippi, citing harassment. Dawn could not bring herself to hate him the way neighbors did. Hatred, she thought, would take up room where determination needed to live. She emptied her savings to hire a private investigator who produced only invoices. She joined online forums for parents of the missing and printed laminated cards that read, "Ask me about Jamal Holloway." In grocery lines, she caught strangers' eyes and forced casual conversation toward lost children, hoping someone would remember a detail they had forgotten. On the first anniversary of Jamal's disappearance, she organized a candlelight vigil outside the courthouse. Waxy rivers of melted white dripped onto her hands, while 15 townspeople sang Amazing Grace. She spoke into a microphone borrowed from the church youth band, promising that the story was not finished, that someone somewhere knew the final chapter, and she would not rest until she read it aloud. Behind her, the sheriff shifted, uncomfortable. Television crews packed up before the last verse. When the lights vanished, Dawn stood alone under a street lamp, pulse echoing in her ears. Year 2 hardened hope into resolve. She learned how to file Freedom of Information requests, sifted arrest logs, and phoned hospitals when unidentified patients appeared. Teachers sent Jamal's 3rd grade coursework home. She stored each workbook in a shoebox. Year 3, she traveled county fair circuits with a booth offering free child ID kits, using the booth fee waived by sympathetic organizers to hand out Jamal's flyers. Every cinnamon dust breeze that carried children's laughter made her heart seize and swell at once. The 5th year, the marriage to Leon collapsed under the weight of silent dinners. He moved to Birmingham, taking a job at the warehouse where no one mentioned school buses. Dawn felt guilty only in short bursts. Mostly she felt empty air where partnership used to be. Her life condensed to work, flyers, vigils, and the annual graveside visit to her parents, where she apologized for outliving the search. Sleep came in fitful fragments, haunted by dreams of yellow paint peeling off endless roads. Yet on certain mornings, light spilled through Jamal's curtains just right, and she could picture him grown, tall, wiry, maybe play guitar the way his uncle had, fingers darting over strings like dragonflies. She let that image hover in her mind, fragile as soap film, because imagining stopped the despair from crystallizing. And so 27 years passed, not in a rushing blur, but in slow, deliberate steps, each one carrying Dawn farther from the moment she watched the number 17 bus lumber away, yet never truly letting go of the child who turned to flash a double thumbs up through dusty glass and vanished into a silence that refused to stay silent forever. Year 6 arrived with a humid March that wrapped Marcusville in a blanket of honeysuckle and regret. Dawn Holloway still started every morning with a glance at the road where the number 17 bus used to stop, a habit so ingrained she scarcely noticed it. Leon returned once a month to drop off his portion of the mortgage. Conversations short and civil, like neighbors discussing weather. Their marriage ended quietly at a county clerk's desk. 2 signatures. No arguments over the house, because neither wanted to live anywhere else. Dawn filled the empty rooms with work. Double shifts at Dalton Textiles, evening courses at the community college, and weekend searches that stretched farther each time. Abandoned barns outside Selma, drainage ditches along interstate rest areas, the shadowy backs of carnival lots where children wandered. She joined the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, studied case files by lamplight, and mailed handwritten letters to governors asking for stronger school bus monitoring. Most replies were form letters, but she kept them anyway, proof that Jamal's name existed in official archives. On the 10th anniversary of the disappearance, a fresh face walked into the sheriff's office. Detective Andrea Lopez, 31, recently transferred from Birmingham's homicide unit. Lopez wore practical shoes and carried a leather-bound notebook full of dog-eared pages. She listened to Dawn for 2 hours, never interrupting, and promised to re-examine the evidence with newer forensic techniques. Dawn delivered 3 cardboard boxes of documents, threadbare flyers, blurry Polaroids, stacks of police reports she had copied at 10 cents a page. Lopez labeled them C98 Holloway and ordered a digital scan. Though no immediate breakthroughs emerged, Dawn felt a quiet shift. Someone inside the system finally treated Jamal's file as more than a formality. Technology crept into Dawn's life through her college-age niece, Tasha, who visited one summer with a refurbished laptop. Tasha created an email account for her aunt and built a rudimentary website titled BringThemHome.org. Dawn learned to post updates, typing cautiously with 2 fingers, and discovered forums where parents traded theories about interstate trafficking rings and underground adoption markets. Late nights she read until her eyes ached, heart swinging between empathy and horror. Yet the connection kept her afloat. She was no longer a lone voice in a cotton mill town, but part of a ragged choir that refused to sing requiems. By the 15th year, Dawn's hair had grayed at the temples, but her resolve sharpened. She spoke at church revivals and PTA meetings, urging parents to photograph birthmarks and fingerprint toddlers. She traveled to Atlanta for a missing children's conference where experts discussed facial aging software. A volunteer digitally aged Jamal to show a lean young man with cautious eyes and a faint mustache. Dawn printed 100 copies and plastered them across truck stop bulletin boards from Savannah to Shreveport, each picture accompanied by the line last seen boarding school bus. Sometimes tips trickled in, a sighting at a state fair, a boy working at a gas station in Kentucky, but each lead died under scrutiny, leaving Dawn with a thicker file and thinner hope. Walter Phelps re-entered the news cycle when an investigative reporter tracked him to Tupelo, Mississippi, living under the name George Randall. The reporter ambushed him outside a bait shop, microphone thrust forward. Phelps shoved the camera and drove off. The brief clip aired on regional television, reigniting local anger, but extradition stalled because no new evidence tied him to Jamal. Dawn watched the segment, noting Phelps' stooped posture and sun-spotted hands, surprised by the faint tremor of pity that flickered before anger reclaimed its place. She prayed, not for revenge, but for truth, the only currency that mattered. Between year 18 and 20, Dawn transformed her spare bedroom into what neighbors called a war room. Walls disappeared under maps punctured with color pins, each hue marking a sighting year. Red yarn connected possible trajectories of a child taken by car, while yellow yarn followed bus routes of neighboring counties in case of mistaken identity. In the center hung Jamal's third-grade portrait, laminated protected from thumbtack scuffs, his gap-toothed grin watching over every theory. Volunteers came and went, taping new clippings, bringing coffee, sometimes crying to Dawn's steady shoulder before returning to their own lives. Dawn rarely cried anymore. The grief had calcified into a keystone holding everything upright. What sustained her was a ritual of speaking to Jamal each night. She dialed his old phone number, now reassigned, and left voicemails anyway, knowing strangers deleted them. She described the garden tomatoes ripening, the neighbor's new puppy, the first time she tried sushi and hated it. She ended each recording the same way. I love you more than any mile between us. Message deleted. She would breathe, reset, and sleep for a few hours before the next sunrise demanded motion. March of year 23. Detective Lopez resurfaced with news of a federal grant for cold case DNA testing. Dawn submitted her own sample along with strands of Jamal's baby hair. She had saved in an envelope marked first haircut. The database produced no immediate matches, but Lopez urged patience. Familial hits sometimes took years. Patience was a muscle Dawn had exercised more than any other. She accepted the weight with silent gratitude for Lopez's persistence. 27 years after the bus rolled away, Dawn's world felt both impossibly distant from that morning and eerily identical. The house remained modest, the mill now automated but still churning 50 hours of paychecks a week. She had stopped imagining Jamal as a child. In her mind, he was a moving target of possibilities. A college student, a soldier, a chef, each identity shedding and reforming as swiftly as she flipped newspapers at breakfast. It was Tasha again who nudged the next door open. Visiting for spring break, she noticed Dawn's flip phone clinging to life with tape over the battery. With gentle insistence, she presented a smartphone and taught Dawn how to use it. Scrolling felt like sliding across an endless magazine, videos blooming at a touch, voices and music spilling to the tiny speaker. Dawn's first upload were sermon snippets and gardening tips. But one evening she searched missing children TikTok and tumbled into a vortex of reunion clips and advocacy feeds. The algorithm began feeding her live streams from around the country. Street performers, church choirs, protest rallies. She did not know it yet, but those scrolling sessions were rewiring an old riverbed of faith inside her. Each swipe said somewhere, someone is broadcasting the truth right now. All you have to do is keep watching. Dawn kept watching. One night soon, the river would deliver a familiar current in the form of a blues riff and a half-forgotten nickname. But for now, she simply let the screen glow against her face in the dark, fingers poised above the glass, ready for a sign. The late summer night hummed with cicadas when Dawn Holloway sat at her kitchen table scrolling to the glow of her new phone. She had just finished folding laundry for a church fundraiser and should have been asleep, but the algorithm kept feeding her live streams from street corners and back porch sessions. Something about anonymous voices drifting through the dark made her feel less alone. A tap, and a different scene replaced the last. New Orleans, according to the caption. A skinny young guitarist balanced on a milk crate near a wrought iron gate, bluesy chords tumbling from his weather-scarred acoustic. Behind him, tourists wandered with beignets and plastic cups. The image dipped when the person filming lowered the phone to drop a crumpled bill into an open guitar case, then steadied on the musician's face. Dawn's heart stuttered. The player's left ear, half hidden by dreadlocks, carried a faint oval shadow at the lobe, the very place where Jamal had worn a birthmark like a smudge of cocoa. The young man's eyes were wide-set and thoughtful, blinking in rhythm that matched the tilt of Jamal's head whenever he concentrated on homework. Dawn leaned closer, squinting until the numbers on the screen blurred. She whispered Jamal's name before she realized she had spoken aloud. Her pulse thumped so loudly it drowned the cicadas. The guitarist paused between songs, adjusted his mic, and glanced at the camera with a crooked smile that released a dimple. Dawn reached for it, fingertips brushing glass. Comments sprinted across the screen. Someone asked him to play Lean on Me. Another joked about signing him to a label. Then a user named BluesMama58 typed, "Nice riff. Miles, where you from?" "Miles," Dawn repeated. The guitarist strummed a softer chord and said, "Name's Miles Carter, born and raised on the road." A laugh rolled through his throat, warm and familiar. He continued, "My mama called me Jay, short for Journey, because I never stopped moving." Journey. Dawn's chest tightened. Jamal's middle name was Jordan. She played the clip again, thumb hovering above the microphone symbol. She wanted to scream, "That is not Miles, that is my son," but panic clogged her voice. She recorded the screen instead, fumbling until the phone saved the video to her gallery. Hands trembling, she hit rewind, paused, zoomed on the ear and dimple. Tasha was staying in the spare room, headphones on, studying for finals. Dawn burst in without knocking. Tasha spun around in alarm until she saw her aunt's face, drained of color but shining at the same time. "I need you to help me," Dawn said, thrusting the phone forward. Tasha watched, mouth falling open. "Andy, that birthmark is identical," she whispered. Dawn nodded, unable to speak because hope flooded her so fiercely it felt like drowning. Tasha opened the comments, found a handle tag to Miles's account, and clicked a link that listed upcoming gigs. He was playing at the French Market every Thursday night, according to a pinned post. Tasha took a screenshot and sent it to Detective Lopez before Dawn could second-guess the rush of possibility. Lopez responded in less than 20 minutes with a single line, "Call me immediately." Dawn dialed. The detective's voice remained calm, but Dawn heard the charged undercurrent. Lopez instructed her to forward the video, high-resolution stills, and any metadata. Lopez promised to file an emergency information request to trace the IP address of the live stream. She cautioned Dawn about false hope, citing look-alike cases. But the detective's measured tone softened when Dawn said the boy on that screen smiled with Jamal's dimples. Lopez ended the call by advising Dawn not to engage the account directly, at least not yet, to avoid spooking him. Dawn agreed, though every instinct begged her to type a message that instant. Night became pre-dawn gloom. Dawn could not sleep. She brewed coffee, packed the old suitcase Leon had left, and filled it with Jamal's childhood photos, the laminated aging projections, and 2 sets of clothes. At 9 a.m., Lopez called again. The stream originated from a hostel on Royal Street in New Orleans, registered under the name Miles Carter, 27 years old. Dawn caught her breath at the age alignment. Lopez said she was coordinating with Louisiana State Police to arrange a discreet meet and confirm. They would need Dawn to identify distinguishing marks in person, and then provide a DNA swab if the young man agreed. Lopez's voice, though professional, held a spark of excitement. Dawn whispered a prayer of thanks. Tasha offered to drive her to Birmingham International Airport, the quickest route south. Dawn phoned Dalton Textiles, informing the supervisor she would be out for family business. The supervisor, aware of Dawn's history, told her not to worry about the time card and promised to ask the prayer chain to lift her up. Dawn gathered her war room maps into a binder, tucked it beside the suitcase, and locked the house. She silently touched the doorframe as she had every day for 27 years, murmuring the ritual farewell she once said to Jamal when he headed to school. "Come back safe, baby." On the highway, Dawn alternated between stillness and frantic questions. What if he had forgotten her? What if trauma had erased early memories? Tasha reassured her that even if Jamal did not remember every detail, DNA would settle truth. Dawn realized her trembling had stopped. For the first time since the bus door closed, momentum pushed her forward instead of dragging her down. She watched pine forest blur outside the window and felt the distance between heartache and possibility shrink. At the airport gate, Lopez texted an update. Louisiana detectives would coordinate a casual contact the next evening, approaching Miles as potential talent scouts seeking ID verification. Dawn would wait in a nearby office to avoid shock. If visual markers aligned, they would invite Miles inside. Dawn agreed, though nerves jangled. The flight boarded. Dawn buckled in, hands clasped until white. She stared at clouds and rehearsed a lullaby "Row Your Boat," so it would not crack when she needed it most. They landed in humid twilight, jazz drifting across the terminal speakers. Lopez met them with 2 plainclothes officers. She gently explained next steps, showed Dawn a photo taken earlier that day of Miles playing beneath a wrought iron balcony, birthmark visible even in grainy sunlight. Dawn studied every pixel until tears blurred the screen. The hotel room later felt too silent for sleep, so Dawn paced, practicing introductions in whispers. "I never stopped looking for you. I saved every drawing you made. I knew that smile anywhere." She drifted off near dawn, dreamless for the first time in years. Evening came swiftly. Dawn sat in the back office of the community hall off Royal Street, hearing distant guitar notes filter through walls. Detective Lopez entered, eyes shining. "He is here," she whispered, "and the birthmark matches." We asked if he would step inside for a quick question about busking permits. "He should be coming now." Dawn's pulse hammered. Every second felt heavier than the collective weight of the 27 years she had carried. She smoothed her blouse, inhaled through her nose, and prepared to step into the next chapter, one she had written and rewritten in hope, but never dared to believe would print itself into reality. Detective Lopez opened the office door, just wide enough for a slim young man to slip through. He held his guitar by the neck, fingertips still poised, as if uncertain where to place them now that the song was over. He wore a linen shirt rolled at the sleeves, sweat beading at his temples from the New Orleans heat. For a heartbeat, the room existed only in outlines to Dawn Holloway, blurred by the rush of blood in her ears. She rose slowly so as not to frighten him. The detective gestured to 2 chairs pulled close together. Miles Carter, if that was truly his name, watched Dawn with polite curiosity, unaware that her whole being trembled on the edge of recognition. Lopez introduced her as a community liaison who advocated for street performers. Dawn tried to steady her voice. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, each word measured. Miles smiled in easy southern cadence, said he was glad to help any cause that kept music on the sidewalks. Dawn reached inside her purse and withdrew a laminated photo. It showed Jamal at 8, front tooth missing, holding up a model rocket they had built one rainy Saturday. She laid it on the table, sliding it toward him with 2 fingers. "I used to know a boy who looked like this," she said. Miles glanced down. His smile faltered. The dimple deepened, then disappeared as his lips pressed together. Lopez asked if he could remove the guitar strap so they could compare the birthmark. Clearly. Miles complied, rolling his collar back. The oval patch beneath his left ear matched shade and shape exactly. Dawn had traced that mark with her fingertip when he was an infant, convinced it was shaped like a tiny map of the moon. Tears welled before she could stop them. She explained her son vanished from a school bus in Alabama in 1998. His name was Jamal Jordan Holloway, but she always called him Jay. At the nickname, Miles flinched, hand going to his chest. Dawn heard his breath hitch. Lopez spoke softly about missing person cases, DNA tests, how sometimes children were taken, and their memories blurred by time and trauma. Miles set the guitar on the floor, knuckles whitening around his knees. He said he did not remember Alabama. Said he grew up moving town to town with an uncle named George Randall who died when Miles was 15. Randall avoided cameras, claimed they owed money everywhere, and never let Miles enroll in school for long. Randall traveled construction gigs that paid cash, leaving Miles in motel rooms with coloring books and cheap radios. Lopez asked if Miles had early memories that fell out of place. Miles closed his eyes. "I hear a song sometimes, row your boat, but layered like someone humming off key," he murmured. Dawn covered her mouth, stifling a sob. She had sung that lullaby nightly. Miles opened his eyes at the sound, confused, searching her face. She whispered that she sang it to calm Jamal's nightmares. His shoulders shook. A tear traveled the birthmark and dropped to his collar. Dawn reached across the table because formality had become cruel. She rested her palm on his. The warmth, the shape, was his even after 27 years. "I never stopped looking," she said. Miles looked at Lopez, who nodded permission to accept what was unfolding. He rose, nearly tipping the chair, and stumbled into Dawn's arms. She wrapped him close, inhaling sweat, guitar varnish, and the faint musky scent of Bourbon Street that clung to his shirt. Minutes passed before either spoke. Lopez gently suggested a buccal swab to confirm. Miles agreed, voice shaking but determined. While the detective prepared the kit, Miles peppered Dawn with questions. Did he have grandparents? Did he like rocket ships? Dawn answered through tears, telling him about the war room, the anniversaries, how she kept his room intact for 10 years before turning it into her search office. She described his favorite meal, peanut butter French toast sandwiches, and he laughed, saying he still preferred peanut butter over anything. Swab sealed, Lopez stepped out to arrange express testing. Dawn and Miles remained alone, staring, absorbing. Dawn produced the voicemail messages she had saved to her computer. She played one on speaker. Her voice from years earlier. "I love you more than any mile between us." Miles's face crumpled as he listened, recognizing the cadence he had tried to recreate in dreams he never understood. He whispered that Randall sometimes called him Jay when drunk, saying nobody wanted that name back in Alabama. Miles assumed it was nonsense. Lopez returned to escort them to a quiet hotel secured by Louisiana State Police. Reporters had not yet caught wind, but news vans were already circling Royal Street after bystanders posted about police activity near the busker. Dawn and Miles took the service elevator. In the room, Miles inspected Dawn's binder of maps and flyers. "Each pin a day you miss me," she explained. He traced a red thread that began at Marcusville and spidered across the south. Tears fell between knuckles. While Miles showered, Dawn phoned Tasha, told her the sonographic truth. He is alive. He is kind. He plays music. Tasha sobbed triumph into the receiver. Dawn asked her to call Leon. She felt no bitterness toward her ex-husband, only a sudden desire for Jamal to see the father who once tucked him in. Later, they ordered gumbo from room service. Miles ate slowly, studying Dawn's face as if memorizing features he half remembered. Dawn asked about Randall. "Where did he take you first?" Miles recalled a yellow trailer in Mississippi. Long days watching cartoons while Randall drank on the porch. There were foggy memories of Randall arguing with a bus driver on TV, throwing the remote. Dawn's stomach twisted. Randall had tracked coverage of the case. A soft knock came at midnight. Lopez entered holding an envelope, her expression alive with certainty. DNA confirmed 99.9% maternity. Dawn felt the room tilt, tears blurring everything until only Miles's outline remained. He crossed the carpet, enveloped her in a hug that anchored 27 years of drifting pain. Lopez cautioned that next steps were delicate. They would brief the district attorney in Alabama, coordinate with Mississippi authorities to arrest Randall, Walter Phelps under his legal name, before news broke. Dawn thanked her, voice hoarse. Miles slipped his phone from his pocket. Live stream again? He joked through tears. Dawn laughed. First free laugh in decades, and told him perhaps tomorrow. Tonight belonged to whispers and lullabies. She sang softly while he drifted to sleep on the couch, guitar resting beside him like an old friend. Row, row, row your boat. Her voice cracked but carried. Each note threaded the years, stitching a lullaby over silence, promising that morning's light will reveal not a vanished boy, but a man who finally knew where his journey began and where home had always waited. Morning broke over New Orleans with pale gold light that filtered through hotel curtains and painted the room in quiet promise. Dawn Holloway sat in an armchair watching her grown son sleep, his dreadlocks fanned across a pillow, guitar still within reach like a guardian. She traced a gentle rise and fall of his chest, marveling that every breath proved yesterday was not a dream. On the table, Detective Andrea Lopez's envelope lay open, its DNA report an official stamp on the truth Dawn had carried her heart the instant she saw that birthmark. Miles stirred, opened his eyes, and smiled with sleepy surprise. Good morning, Mama. The word poured over Dawn like warm water. She crossed him and kissed his forehead. The simple ritual she had practiced nightly in memory, but not in flesh for 27 years. They spoke softly of trivial things, weather, favorite breakfast foods, bridging decades with mundane familiarity until a knock sounded. Lopez entered with two plainclothes officers, their expressions sober but hopeful. Overnight, a judge in Mississippi had signed a warrant for Walter Phelps, still registered in DMV databases under his birth name despite living as George Randall. Phelps was located at a rental cabin near Tupelo. State police would move in within hours. Miles gripped the arms of the couch. He admitted fragments had begun surfacing. Phelps calling him boy in clipped tones, warning him never to answer strangers, promising to take him home soon. Dawn's hand found his. Lopez assured Miles he could provide a statement when ready, but faced no pressure to do so immediately. Trauma unfolds on its own timeline, she reminded them. The detective also explained that media interest had exploded overnight. Someone in the French Market crowd had posted a photo of police escorting Miles, captioned with speculation that he was a long-lost child. Reporters were already outside the hotel. Dawn felt anxiety tighten her stomach, but Miles surprised her by saying he wanted to face cameras if it might help other missing families. He asked Dawn's permission to share their story. She nodded, eyes shining, and squeezed his hand. Lopez set up a brief press conference in a small ballroom downstairs. Before descending, Dawn lent Miles a press-collared shirt she had purchased in the gift shop. It hung loose on a slender frame, but he rolled the sleeves like a practiced musician. They walked side by side to a service elevator flanked by officers. As doors opened into ballroom's back corridor, Dawn heard the muted drone of voices and camera shutters. The detective stepped to the podium first, summarizing the case. An 8-year-old abducted in 1998, identified through a viral live stream and familial DNA. Suspect apprehension underway. Then she introduced Dawn and Miles Holloway. Flashbulbs painted white burst across the room. Dawn gripped the podium, heart hammering. She spoke plainly. I searched every day, but hope is not a straight line. It bends, cracks, and still holds. If you are missing a child, if you have missing faith, keep looking. The sire Miles cleared his throat and told the press he had never understood the empty ache he carried until yesterday. He thanked New Orleans for its kindness and promised his music would now be dedicated to families of the missing. Questions flew. What did he remember? Was he angry? Miles answered with calm honesty. Memory is a fog, but music was my compass. He described nights in motels where Randall... He stopped, corrected himself, where Phelps drank until morning, how Miles taught himself guitar to drown out arguments through thin walls. A reporter asked if he forgave Phelps. Miles stared at the microphone a long moment. Forgiveness, he said, belongs to whatever helps me live free. Justice belongs to courts. After the conference, Dawn and Miles slipped through a kitchen exit into an unmarked sedan. They were driven to a state office where social workers guided them through paperwork. Updated birth certificate requests, reinstatement of Social Security number, temporary health care coverage. Dawn marveled at each document, a bureaucratic stitch sewing her son back into the world. During break, she and Miles shared stories. Dawn recounted Jamal's obsession with constellations. Miles shared how he once mapped highway signs for fun, not realizing he was tracing his way back toward Alabama. Late afternoon brought a call from Lopez. Phelps had been arrested without incident. He initially denied everything until confronted with photos comparing Jamal at 8 and Miles at 27. Phelps requested a lawyer, but not before uttering, "I thought this would never catch up." Lopez relayed the statement, and Dawn felt neither satisfaction nor rage. Only quiet relief that another mother might be spared similar pain. News outlets aired the reunion story nationwide. Messages poured into Dawn's new email. Strangers thanking her for perseverance. Mothers asking how to keep hope alive. Musicians inviting Miles to collaborate. A representative from a national center for missing and exploited children offered to fund a benefit concert. Miles proposed returning to Marcusville for the show, turning the town that lost him into a beacon for others. Dawn loved the idea. Closing the circle felt right. 3 days later, they flew to Alabama under escort. Leon waited at the airport, hat in hand, eyes red. Dawn watched father and son embrace. It was awkward, strained, but honest. Leon apologized for leaving the marriage when despair outgrew him. Miles said he understood. Grief carved people into shapes they never imagined. They agreed to walk slowly toward rebuilding. In Marcusville, the community prepared for Miles's homecoming concert at the high school stadium. Businesses donated lumber for a stage. Churches volunteered ushers, and the mill offered overtime workers paid leave to attend. Dawn revisited her war room one last time, removing pins and yarn, gently packing everything into storage boxes. The empty walls felt strange, but she realized the morning collage had completed its purpose. She painted the room soft blue and set up a guest bed. Home should welcome Jamal back, not imprison him in memories. Concert day dawned clear and breezy. Volunteers strung lights across bleachers. Dawn watched from the sidelines as Miles tested microphones. He dedicated the set list to missing children still waiting to be found. At sunset, the field filled with neighbors, media, and parents clutching posters of their own lost kids. Dawn stepped on stage to introduce Jamal Miles Holloway, the boy who rode a school bus into silence and found his voice again to the sound hole of the guitar. Miles began with "Lean on Me," chords rising warm and steady. Halfway through, he gestured for Dawn to join him. She hesitated, then walked forward. He whispered, asked the band to drop down. Dawn's shaky soprano launched into "Row, row, row your boat." The crowd joined, voices overlapping and round, like currents converging. Dawn felt years of nocturnal voicemails unspool into the open air and dissolve. Lights glimmered across faces. Old, young, black, white, united by this improbable chorus. When the last note faded, Miles lifted Dawn's hand. Applause surged, rolling like thunder across the field. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they tasted of salt and sunlight, not sorrow. She gazed at her son, lit by stadium floodlights, and thought about the tattered flyers, the vigils, the prayers spoken in whispers. None of it had been wasted. Every step had led to the stage, this song, this undeniable proof that love stretched further than fear. After the encore, Dawn walked the field shaking hands, holding babies thrust forward by grateful mothers. She offered the only counsel she knew. Never let anyone schedule your grief. Never accept unfinished stories. In the background, Miles signed guitar picks and promise bracelets, each etched with initials JH and the number 27. Night carried them home to the mill house where Dawn had placed fresh sheets on Jamal's childhood bed, resized for a grown man. They sat at the kitchen table sipping tea while crickets sang. Miles asked if she ever resented the years lost. Dawn considered the question. Time didn't steal those years, she said. Silence did. Now that we have your voice, every minute ahead is ours to write. Miles smiled, touching the birthmark, the compass that guided her, and said, then let's make every one of them count. Dawn nodded, hearing in the quiet bridge of their heartbeats the first notes of a future unscripted by absence. She rose, kissed his forehead once more, and turned off the kitchen light, certain at last that tomorrow would dawn not on a void, but on a map with new roads to travel together. Autumn settled over Marcusville with crisp mornings that smelled of wood smoke and ripe muscadines. The town had not seen such steady foot traffic in years, but people drove from 3 states to stand beneath the murals students painted on the high school gym, a giant school bus steering into sunrise, its windows filled with silhouettes lifting guitars and notebooks. Under the bus in turquoise script read, "Every child deserves a ride home." Dawn Holloway parked outside the gym on a Saturday to meet the art class that requested a visit. She walked the length of the wall, touching each brushstroke name, thankful that strangers now rhymed Jamal with words like hope and home instead of gone and missing. Inside, Miles tuned the Sunburst Electric, while teenagers positioned camera phones for a live Q&A. He had kept his promise to use music for advocacy, releasing a single title Homeward that charted on streaming platforms and donated every cent to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He told the students that chords were just questions searching for answers, and that every missing kid was the same. One question, "Where are you?" repeated over and over until someone brave enough refused to stop asking. Dawn watched the room lean forward, the way people do when hearing both a story and a command. She realized her son had inherited her refusal to accept silence, turning it into song. While Miles spoke, Detective Andrea Lopez arrived in plain clothes, holding an envelope stamped with the Mississippi Circuit Court seal. After the session, she handed it to Dawn and Miles in the hallway away from the students' chatter. The name across the top read Walter Phelps. Sentencing summary. Phelps had pleaded guilty to kidnapping, child trafficking, and fraud, trading a drawn-out trial for the chance to avoid a life sentence. The judge still gave him 30 years with no parole and ordered restitution for Dawn's financial losses, though Lopez admitted they would likely never collect. Dawn felt neither triumph nor vengeance. Justice, she thought, was simply daylight poured into rooms where secrets once hid. She tucked the envelope into her tote beside campaign leaflets for statewide child safety legislation. The following week, Dawn drove the familiar two-lane highway to Montgomery for a committee hearing. She carried a binder of proposed requirements: GPS trackers for rural school buses, mandatory driver background checks, continuous onboard camera systems with remote upload. Leon met her at the Capitol steps, wearing a suit that fit a little tightly around his middle. They sat together in the chamber, shoulders brushing, united for the first time in years by something other than grief. Dawn spoke for 8 minutes, voice steady as she described the cost of 19-cent electrical wiring that failed on Phelps's bus camera and the 27-year debt she had paid for that failure. When she finished, a hush lingered before the chair thanked her and moved to questions. The bill advanced a full vote that same afternoon with bipartisan support. Outside, reporters asked how it felt to change the law. Dawn said she preferred to think of it as changing the map, so other parents never wandered as long. News of the bill's passage rippled outward. Emails arrived from school districts seeking guidance. Dawn responded to everyone at the kitchen table where Jamal once did math homework. She designed a workshop curriculum, and Miles offered to headline a series of regional concerts to fund free training sessions. They named the initiative Journey Back, Jamal's old nickname transformed into Purpose. Journey Back hosted its first conference in Birmingham that winter, drawing bus drivers, principals, and parents. Dawn stood backstage watching Miles and the event with Homeward, hundreds of attendees humming the hook, while screens behind him cycled photos of long-term missing children. She thought about the night she first suspected the guitarist on TikTok was her son, and felt gratitude for algorithms, coincidences, and every mundane miracle disguised as data. Life settled into rhythms unfamiliar, but welcome. Miles rented a small cottage near the river, close enough to visit Dawn for Sunday dinners where they debated chord progressions and pie crust recipes. Leon often joined, learning to navigate his place in a reknit family. Sometimes conversation drifted to lost years, and they acknowledged sorrow without letting it swallow joy. Miles started therapy through a nonprofit for adult survivors of abduction, and Dawn attended parallel sessions for families of the recovered. Healing felt slow and uneven, but both recognized progress and laughter that came easily, and silence no longer haunted. One blustery January morning, Dawn found herself alone for the first time in weeks. The house felt too still, shelves cleared of war room boxes, and walls freshly painted. She brewed coffee and walked to Jamal's old room, now a guest space lined with books about astronomy and guitar theory. On the desk sat the laminated third-grade portrait, the last artifact she had kept on display. She considered moving it to a scrapbook, then left it where it was. The road behind them mattered too. Outside, wind rattled the mailbox. Dawn retrieved a thick envelope from the Alabama Bureau of Investigation. Inside was a medal for civilian perseverance, awarded annually but rarely accepted in person, because recipients feared reliving loss. Dawn smiled, deciding she would accept it. Accepting did not reopen wounds. It testified they had closed. Spring crept in early. Miles invited Dawn to tour with him for 3 dates across Georgia and the Carolinas. She hesitated, protective of her worn mill worker routine, then remembered telling audiences to pursue every mile. She packed the same suitcase she carried to New Orleans. This time no flyers or maps, only clothes, photos of food she wanted to try, and a notebook labeled Next Chapter. On stage in Savannah, Miles paused mid-set, gesturing to Dawn seated among families of the missing. He recounted the voicemail messages she left him over the years and asked the crowd to turn on phone lights. Thousands of small suns flickered to life. Miles asked everyone to record a 30-second video saying, "Jamal, we are glad you are home," then urged them to send similar videos to any missing child tip line they knew. Dawn watched faces shine in the glow, felt her heart swell at a collective chorus refusing silence. Back in Marcusville after the tour, Dawn walked the route she and Jamal once took to the bus stop. Children she did not know waited there now, earbuds and laughing. She introduced herself to the driver, a woman with warm eyes, watched as she scanned each student's ID card under a GPS-linked reader. Dawn exhaled, reassured. She retraced her steps home, noticing how the morning light slanted different than it had 27 springs earlier, yet warmed the same red clay. That evening, Miles cooked dinner at Dawn's house, improvising gumbo with too much okra. They sat at the kitchen table, steam fogging window panes. Miles asked what she planned next. She laughed, admitting she had feared the question, then answered she wanted to learn guitar, if he had patience for beginners. He reached behind the chair, produced a child-sized acoustic he had refinished and strung with nylon for soft fingers. They tuned it together, Dawn fumbling first chords, Miles guiding her wrist. Row, row, row your boat floated between them, no longer a lullaby of longing, but one of simple companionship. Outside, twilight deepened, cicadas whispering the eternal pulse of their small town. Dawn pressed a final chord, uneven and perfect, and realized that journey did not end upon reunion. It unfolded forward, river meeting horizon, carrying mother and child in the same current at last, rowing gently, merrily, side by side toward whatever sunrise waited.